Afternoon, Russ. Time for update number 2. As you can see, been doing a fair bit of work today. The farm job got called off because of the weather, so I came out here. Right, so I got the engine out of the bike. That's out of the way. Fuel tank's over there safely on the bench. And I've been having a bit of a wrench fest. So this all looks fairly complicated, but it actually really isn't. There's a simple technique. Back end of the table here is back cylinder, front end of the table is front cylinder, and all the bolts, camshafts and everything are all also in their correct locations. Cylinders and barrels, it doesn't matter because they're labelled, you can't get them wrong, they won't go on the wrong way around. Throttle body and the famous air filter or air cross tube. Remember I said about one of those square nuts? There's one. There's one missing, so come on, focus. So I'll have to see if I can find you one. It won't really matter, it can't go anywhere anyway. Right, good news and bad news. Good news is this engine's never been taken pieces before, and I can tell that because when Kawasaki build them, they use a particular type of bonding sealant stuff, which you can't see there because it's on the top side. See if I can find you a bit of it. Yeah, here. This sort of brown stuff here. Come on, focus. It's actually called Kawabond. It's a form of silicon sealant stuff. But you only find it on engines that haven't been apart previously because no one bothers to buy the Kawabond stuff. You just use silicon sealant. So, engine's never been to bits before. The heads and valves are in good condition. This is the rear cylinder. And this is the front. One's running a little bit rich by the look of that, but nothing terrible. The barrels are in nice condition. There's nothing wrong with those. All the mating surfaces are good and true. No sign of blown head gasket. Same on the front. However, I now have a diagnosis, and I would have bet money on this. In fact, I bloody wish I had done. This is the rear cylinder, so rear of the engine prop shaft connection. If you get hold of the piston and try and pull it upright, nothing. And I'm pulling really hard, nothing. No movement at all. Side to side, very little, just where it slides on the gudgeon pin. But up and down, absolutely nothing. So that's fine. Means the rear is good. Very different story on the front. And this is where I would have bet money, because it's always, well, in my experience, it's always the front. Listen. Now, I'm going to try and film this. It's pretty difficult. I can't get a good angle. Let me see if I can move things and get you a nice angle. Actually, I've just found a problem on the rear cylinder as well. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Anyway, I'm not going to be able to get in there to film this. What's happening is this piston, don't know if you can see how much it's moving. Hang on, let me try and steady the camera. It's moving, I would say, up and down, probably at least 1/4 of an inch. Now what that tells me is that the top and bottom main bearing, not the main bearing, the conrod bearings, the shell bearings, both have been completely destroyed to give you that amount of movement. That's really significant movement, and that's that bang, 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 bang. That's what I could hear when I had the stick up against the engine. So, most definitely conrod bearings knackered on the front. If you are an extremely lucky boy, it will not have damaged the crank. But again, I'm going to bet money the crank is destroyed, because that's really bad. Problem I've just found on the rear cylinder, it seems like gudgeon pin is frozen solid. because that piston's not tipping. If you look at this one, it will tip backwards and forwards, because the pistons, as they go up the cylinder and then reach top dead center, they have to tip to come down, so they're doing this movement. You probably know all this. Front cylinder's doing that. Rear cylinder, that's solid, so that gudgeon pin is seized, which means I need to re-inspect the rear barrel a bit more, because if it's doing that, it's probably scored the bejesus out of the rear cylinder. Yeah, it has. That cylinder's fucked. Deep scoring. See it? I didn't notice that a moment ago. That's fucked. Technical terms, I use them all the time, mate. So you need a new barrel. The actual barrel itself is okay. You need a new sleeve. I might have one. I'll have a hunt. I have changed them before. It's actually not that scary. Don't tell the wife, but the way I released it was to put it in the dishwasher. Let it run for half an hour. It warmed up enough that I gave the steel cylinder a tap from the underside, from here, and it fell out. Okay. This could get expensive. You're looking at, this piston's going to be problematic. New rings, because they will have been rubbing hard against the cylinder wall. I wouldn't trust them. They're not broken, but again, wouldn't trust them, because they've been put under a lot of lateral load, which they're not designed for. This front piston might be okay. Bearings are knackered. Crankshaft almost certainly very badly scored. The last one I did had less movement than that, but the crank was also destroyed. What we need to keep our fingers crossed about is that the damage is confined to the crankshaft area and that it hadn't got as far as eating the case bearings. You remember these bearings, where the crankshaft runs, which is about there, so about here in the case, but further down, in line with the crank, you've got one either side, one there and one down there. These are fitted into the case, and you can see on one side you've got a little bite out of it, that's actually broken, and on the other side it's squashed out slightly. This camera's not focusing very well, sorry about that. There we go. It's pushed out. When these are put in the case, they are deliberately staked into the case, so these sections are pushed into the case so that the bearing can't rotate. For this one, you can see it broke that and did rotate, which is why it's got scoring on the outside of it. You can see, because that had been spun in the case, and you can't replace them. So fingers crossed it hasn't gone that far, but we are in serious territory. I'll start looking to see if I can find a 1500 crank. I did have a look through my stores. I've got a 1600 crank. That's no good. And I'm pretty sure I've got some cylinders that could probably work. In fact, I know I have, because if you look over there on the shelf, you can see a little collection. And I've got at least another 4. So I can definitely rustle up a cylinder, or a liner rather. Anyway, sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I won't know more until I split the case, and I haven't got time to do that today, but now that we're into British summertime, it means I've got a little bit more light, and that means I can get out a bit after work and do some stuff in the shed. So next stage is open up the engine and separate the case, and then I can tell you more. Okay, mate. Speak to you soon. Bye.